Hello and welcome, my partners in crime. Welcome back to Murder Analysed for another true crime case. Now, this case is a very sort of recent case. Now, last week we did the case of Penelope Jackson and we had lots of feedback on that. And I told you then that I was going to be doing a couple of cases that were, you know, a sort of to come in alongside that, to give you an overview of what really domestic abuse in this country is really like. And you could say maybe the sentencing's different between men and women and the different facts and stuff that's going on. So in these two cases that's coming up, that will help to sort of widen your knowledge, I think, of what's really going on in the UK and the laws on the UK of domestic violence. To do with all these cases. So today's case is the killing of Ruth Williams. It is solved. It is, I would say that there's going to be some talk on this one. There's going to be some comments coming back on this one. You know, it is a controversial case. I believe it is. And I'd like to know whether you think this man got what he really deserved. So before we start, don't forget that you can subscribe anytime through this video. You can put your thumbs up button, you know, your like button, and you can hit that bell button and find out when next videos are due out. I suppose I with this case, I really needed to do it. One, because these are quite controversial cases, okay? But two, I felt like sometimes a lot of people felt that I was maybe hard on Penelope Jackson on what I said, but we're talking about the law here, okay, and how the sentences and stuff reflect the crime, or so we would think. But also we're talking about how the jury may look at stuff, how it's presented to a jury, what defences you're going to use and stuff like that. So these sort of cases, this one and the next one that's coming up, and the one of Penelope Jackson's case, sort of outline that in I think quite a good way, really, for you to understand what's really going on. So anyway, on the 28th of March 2020, this 70-year-old Anthony Williams from Wales. Now, as all of you know with Wales, I love Wales, but I can't pronounce all the stuff, so I'm going to write it up, and also there's a map there. But as you know, I always go to Swansea, and this isn't far from Swansea at all. So anyway, I'll put everything up there about where it was. Now, this Anthony Williams, this 70-year-old man, strangled to death his 67-year-old wife. Now, they were married 50 years. 50 years. So, similar, I suppose, when we look at it, to Penelope's case, only in age. So, the following February, he pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. And he was acquitted then of murder. So I think his first charge, they charged him with murder. And then, of course, we always charge high, because then at least you can come down. And as I've said with murder before, it's hard murder because you're trying to, you have to prove intent. Now, I'd like to know in your mind by the end of this whether you think that there was intent, you know, or was it manslaughter. It's a really important question, this one, because the sentences are, you know, quite low here. Anyway, his defence argued that he acted due to a mental state which had been worsened by COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, now we'll talk about this a little bit later in this video. So the court was told that William had not slept for days. He had worries over money and coronavirus and his health and stuff. And so this is sort of now building up to his defence of diminished responsibility. And a psychiatrist told the jury that his mental health state had dramatically deteriorated after retiring in 2019, and the coronavirus, you know, pandemic that had made things even worse. So the lesser charge and the sentence of 5 years imprisonment was criticised by politicians and anti-domestic abuse activists. Now, of course, it should be. Now, we're going to go into the facts now and a bit of a background on this. And so you can understand why people are not happy about these sentences at all. So according to Anthony Williams' daughter and Ruth's daughter, the couple had no history of violence or arguments. Well, I don't know. As I've said before, in all these cases, we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. And to say that there was no violence or argument, I think when you say no argument, I think there's something that probably isn't so true. Anyway, she said that her father had become obsessed with reducing his energy bills in January 2020, even though he was financially secure. So there was no money worries within this household. He had retired, things were going well financially. Then he became obsessed with the news about COVID-19. I can understand that. And when the lockdown was imposed, he feared that he would not leave his house again. This was what they're saying was his stress that made him, or part of what made him do this to his wife. Now, according to Anthony Williams' police interview, his wife told him just to get over it. Get over his fears, his worries about COVID-19. You're not going to be trapped in the house forever. She's married to this man for 50 years. And to say something like, just get over it. I mean, I say to my husband, snap out of it. But you don't expect to be murdered over using them words. But he says that's what she said, and that's what triggered him then to do what he did. Just get over it. Anyway, they were in bed, and in his own words, he snapped. He attacked her, continued the violence downstairs. So she had left the room. This started in the bedroom, in bed. This violent, encounter with his wife for 50 years because she said this simple words, get over it. He continued downstairs and she was found dead, actually, in the porch of her home. So he'd strangled her to death, and he actually said, I think, to the police that he'd strangled the life out of her. That was his words. Strangled the life out of her. But also, her death was put down to, under autopsy, was pressure to the neck, strangulation, and 3 fractured bones. Ruth was found slumped on that porch of her home in the Hollybush area. Now, let's think about this a little bit before we go on. So you've been married to a man for 50 years. He says he's a bit stressed. I mean, in January 2020, we'd only just gone into lockdown anyway. I think he was only in lockdown for 5 days. He'd retired in 2019, all right, and give him that. People that retire, I mean, this man was 70, he's worked all his life, can sometimes get a little bit down and depressed about that. But to blame COVID-19, yes, it was only going on for 5 days, and a lot of people did have stress and worries about things. But after 5 days of just being in lockdown, I don't think we can say much about COVID-19. I think, and when now we relate this case back to Penelope Jackson's case, this man was 70, and we had a lot of people saying a man of 70 can't do a lot of damage. This man was 70, and he strangled her and broke 3 bones, 3 fractures. There was 3 fractures on her body from this man. Now, he said he snapped, and he snapped for them reasons, and there was no domestic abuse, was there, ever reported. And as we've said in many of these cases, domestic abuse isn't always reported. But when I read these cases and I research these cases, you have to think, what is the ultimate, really, domestic abuse? It's the murder of someone. It's the murder of someone, of Ruth Williams, who was married to this man for 50 years. That's the ultimate, domestic abuse charge you can get, isn't it? Really? Did it matter that there wasn't any reports of it before? I don't think it does. I think when you murder your wife because she said, get over it, to do with something, and you say you've just snapped, you've instantaneous snapped. It started in the bedroom, it's led then downstairs to where this woman, when you try and strangle someone, I'm sure, this woman's screaming and shouting, trying to get help. She's trying to get you off her. Surely you would have snapped out of it. Surely. This woman, don't forget, ended up dead in her porchway of her home. Not in the bedroom, in the porchway. So I don't know if his story adds up, really. I just don't. I don't. But anyway, let's carry on. And I think after he had murdered her, he went to a neighbour's and told them what happened. He also told the police straight away, as I've said, that he strangled the life out of her. He showed remorse right from day one. He never said that he had planned to kill her. He said straight away that he had just snapped, and that's where your defence of diminished responsibility comes from. So of course he went to trial, and he pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility, and he was tried at Swansea Crown Court. So this psychologist said, he'd argued that this, all this what was going on had impaired everything. His faculties were impaired due to this anxiety and this worry over COVID-19 and stuff like this, and he was having issues where he couldn't sleep and stuff. So listen, he does sound like he was having depression and stuff like that, but he was not having a psychotic episode, right? He was a bit anxious, a bit depressed, maybe a bit worried about COVID, but he did not have a psychotic episode that you could use that sort of mental health for. He didn't have that. And he had no actual history at all of mental health, at all. So they couldn't have any reliance on previous issues. There was none. There was none until this date of this man done this to his wife. There was nothing about him at all. So listen, he was found, not guilty of murder, was he? He got manslaughter, and that was a unanimous verdict. And I'm going to start off now by saying he's right from day one. I suppose you can say his case was a lot different from Penelope Jackson's, because this man came across, didn't he, as this 70-year-old married man. He was grieving the loss of his wife, even though he'd killed her. He had remorse, deep remorse. He had his daughter who backed him up and said that there was no domestic abuse, no arguing, no nothing. So it looked like he had just snapped. So there was a lot of differences between this case and the case of Penelope. But the thing is that this woman still died. He still killed her, took her life. She was 67, not ill in any way, actually very healthy, very healthy. She had quite a long time to live her life. She loved this man. So it's said now, but she's not here, is she, to tell us that? She's now dead. They was married 50 years in this wonderful, happy marriage. That's what they want you to believe. 50 years, that means if she was 67, she'd been married to him 50 years. She met him when she was 17. It's a long time, isn't it, to be with someone? A long time. So do I think that there was any domestic abuse before? We don't know, but I would assume there was something. Do we think there was coercive control or behaviour? Could have been. Just because the daughter hadn't seen it. Could have been. Or do we believe that he had just snapped? That was it. After 50 years of this happy marriage, for the wife to turn around and say, get over it, that you snapped. You strangled this woman, in your words. You strangled the life out of her, and you've broken, fractured bones in her body, left her dead on the porchway of your home. So, I don't know, I think there's issues here in this case, definitely. So that due to this, plea and everything, he's, and they believed him that he was the manslaughter charge. They believed everything he said. And he got 5 years in prison. Now, when you think that this was a sustained attack, as I said, he didn't just wake up, have a row, strangle her, instant like that. He didn't do that. It was prolonged, sustained. More injuries. Upstairs, downstairs, died in the porchway. There's a trail of this man, of what he's done to this woman. There's other injuries apart from the strangulation. So I think that's the part, I don't know what happened in this trial, but, that's, anyway, that's what he got. But, so when we think about, right, if you get manslaughter, what would you usually serve? So, in all prisoners, right, in England and Wales, and this is all prisoners in England and Wales, are released halfway through their sentence point. Good behaviour, this, that and the other. We're given 20 years, they do 10. Right? That's it. Then, you have to take off, though, time served, don't you? So this man, when he was arrested, he was put on remand, kept on remand for I think about 11 months or whatever it was. So really this man in the end would have only he got a 5-year sentence for his diminished responsibility plea of manslaughter, which was unanimous actually, they gave it to him. You take off the time he spent, he would do less than 2.5 years in prison for the murder of Ruth Williams, his wife of 50 years. That's it. 2.5 years and you're out. 2.5 years and you're out. For murder. It's a shocking case this really when you think about it. Now in one way we look at the Jackson case and we think that that's a shocking case. But when you look at this case, this woman trusted him, loved him, so he says. He took someone's life, and I think the judge said this overwhelming, greatest tragedy here is this lady of 67 years old who was in good health in her life, and it was ended by the hands of a man that she had loved for nearly 50 years. I think the judge also said, that, in a couple of minutes, what you can do to your life and your children's life and stuff, in a couple of minutes. He could have walked away from this. I mean, to say you've lost it and you've lost control over someone saying them words to you, I don't get it. When you've had this happy, loving relationship, I don't get it. You've lost the daughter. The daughter, has lost her mother in this. That's it. If you did do it for that reason, you've got to live with that for the rest of your life, haven't you? That you took, the woman that you've meant to have loved, cared for, in the best times of your life. You're now retired. You could have had everything. You had no money worries, did you? You had nothing. But you took this, you took a life of this woman that you've cared for and loved. So if it was what he says it was, how must he be feeling now? But listen, we've got to think, haven't we? Right? Do you believe him? Now, the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, had already ordered an inquiry to carry out into this death, adding that she was not satisfied with this council's decision not to carry out a domestic homicide review. After writing to the council, Ms Patel said that this was an appalling case and my thoughts with the family and friends of Ruth. which we all would say and we all think. So the local authority public service board said that it would carry out an inquiry. Because don't forget, in COVID, when we've had shutdowns, lockdowns, jobs closing, you know, people losing their jobs, we've had people working from home, no social services were going out to see people. There was, all these charities were stopped from taking people in unless it was a real emergency. You know, domestic abuse went up. The figures are amazing, and it's all over the world, right? The figures for domestic abuse from all areas, from all sides, whether you're a man or a woman, went up. They went up. We know that. We know that. But are we using this COVID as an excuse to get away with bloody murder? I'm a bit depressed. I was putting the lights on where I was worried about my bills, even though you have money. We was only 5 days into a lockdown when this man done this crime. You know, can you blame COVID for everything? No. No, you can't. Not when it comes down to murder. You can't. Of course this bloody sentence was too lenient. What are you telling people? What are we telling people about this sentence of 5 years? You've done your 11 months on remand and then you'll be out in, you know, under 2.5 years. What are we saying to people now about what's expected in society, about how you treat your partner, your wife of 50 years? What are we telling them? You know, so listen, the law, and I've said this before with this law, and the next case coming up is actually even worse than this one. We had Penelope Jackson jailed for murder for 18 years, and she was 67 at the time that she murdered David. We've had this man murder his wife, Ruth, of 50 years. He was married for 50 years. And his excuse was, under diminished responsibility, that he lost control, instantaneously lost it. Really? I don't know. I don't know. And I think what this case does, for all the people that wrote comments and stuff about David being 70, you know, she wouldn't be scared of a 70-year-old. Listen, we knew these two were bickering, right? These last two, David and Penelope. We don't know these were bickering. We don't know. This man had given up work in 2019. We don't know. This woman had been married for him for, you know, 50 years. She was 17 when she met this man. She may have been controlled by him. You don't know. Because we really don't know what's going on behind closed doors. So listen, during this, let's get back to this case. During this case, we've heard, haven't we, that he said that his mental health was bad, you know, his mental state, you know, was severely affected at this time. It could have been, but there was no history of that before at all. His sentence was referred to the appeals court by the Attorney General because they believed it was unduly lenient. See what's going to come out about that. But, you know, lots of people have got involved in this. There's lots and lots of people get involved in this. And the thing is, from April this year, 2021, we've got the new Domestic Act, haven't we? Domestic Abuse Act comes in. Now, there's a lot in there, but if we're going to put these laws into place, right, we have to use them, don't we? We have to. So as a domestic homicide between a husband and a wife, sentencing guideline for domestic abuse should have been considered here. So this is what I mean, 5 years. You know, even if you think, when we talk about, you know, manslaughter, you can actually go up to 18 years for manslaughter. The judges have a lot in their sentencing ability here. But people believed him, you see, 70. No history. No nothing. Listen, this man should have got 10 years. He should have. And then he would have done his 5. Right? But to give a man 5 years, knowing he's only going to do half, what, did they feel sorry for him? I don't know. I don't know. But you took a life. You know, this is what we're saying, that this is all that Ruth was worth. This is it. This is all her life was worth. Was that? Oh, I think it's shocking, really. I think the other thing, I think that the prosecution, well, the judge noted that both prosecution and defence submitted William had low levels of responsibility at this time of this manslaughter, because we can't call it murder because he's been done for manslaughter, but little said the trial prosecution was wrong to say, and they said, sorry, the prosecution have said it was wrong to say that he had lower levels of retained responsibility at the time of this killing. And that his anxiety and depression condition, not any form of delusion or psychological disorder were reported. It was just depression. As I said, there wasn't a psychotic episode that made him lose his knew what he was doing, not knowing what he was doing. So he had capacity, right? So if you have capacity, you sort of know what you're doing. You may have lost it for an instant. As I said to you, this long time between, and it was quite violent, to not only to the strangulation, but then the other wounds to her. So, when would he have snapped out of it then? Just see what I mean? And I think there's a lot with this case. When you strangle someone, it's not quick. It's not quick. It's not painless. You're suffering. She suffered. It's not a quick thing, is it? You're telling me when he's looking up, looking down at her as he's strangling her, killing her, that he doesn't snap out of it? I don't know. And I think I'm going to leave this one up to you, because I just wanted to tell you about this case quickly. Because it is a case, really, and I think that even the appeals court actually have said that it was a one-off. That's it, he just snapped. It was a one-off. Just happened. Well, that's great, isn't it? For all the people out there being, domestically abused. It was a one-off. So I think, listen, with this case, and then we have the next case coming up, and we have the one prior. I think the law is a strange thing, isn't it? I think in the law, you're relying on whether the jury is going to believe you. Now, as I said, the difference with the case of this one and Penelope Jackson's case is there was a body cam worn by the police officers at the time of her arrest. And we've all seen it, haven't we? We've seen it on the telly, it's been everywhere, hasn't it? Where she's telling you, blatantly telling you, what she's done and why she's done it in a certain way. So the jury are now seeing things. So it's difficult, isn't it? And I mean, one of my friends said to me, gosh, it was a bit hard on them defence team. But well, you have to think, don't you? Just because we have new laws, sometimes when you're planning a case and a defence for someone, you have to look at the whole picture, and you have to see what evidence that jury is going to see, and whether you believe that that jury are really going to accept that evidence. And without question, the jury accepted that evidence from the body cams. I'm compos mentis, I know what I'm doing. And the difference with the case, of course, with this case, is that she stabbed him 3 times, once and then twice more, and told the police on these body cams that she wanted to do it more. And no, don't save him. So this case would have been a very, very difficult case for anybody to prove that there was some form of diminished responsibility to get that down to manslaughter. So you can say the judge and jury, as I've said before, didn't believe it, like in this case of the Williams case, is that they believed him because he came across from day one as remorseful. He came across as a 70-year-old man who was in love with his wife. He didn't dish his wife, he didn't, diminish her character in any way, did he? So the difference is not just about the facts of the case, it's about how them facts of that case are presented to the jury. Now, totally different. Plus, in this case, in this Williams case, the poor death of Ruth, you know, this woman who was meant to be in this loving relationship for 50 years, her daughter stood up for him and said he's never done anything like that before. There was no history of it. His character also wasn't taken through the grinder and put out, as like Penelope Jackson's character was. Plus, she tried to destroy her husband's character, and he wasn't here to defend himself. So when you look at everything to do with the Jackson case and this case, they are different in the way that they had been presented to the jury right from day one. Now, with the Jackson case, and I've spoke about Alawalla's case before, where she was tried for murder and then got off, didn't she, on diminished responsibility, and was out after about 3 years, I think, on time served. But her case, you see, set a precedent for this thing called a slow burn. Now, we mentioned it quickly before. Now, a slow burn, if I was going to go with someone like Penelope Jackson's case, because a slow burn, you see, doesn't have to be loss of control now, instantly. It's from when things happened way back and they've come up slowly. And I always say it, and I used to say it to my students, it's like, you know, them cartoons you have, and they, you know, they light the pretend bomb and it's got this long flex on it. That's what slow burn is, you see. So it's not just one incident that sets it off, that makes you lose control. It's a long, long time coming, and then you blow up, you lose your shit. And you know what? When you look at Penelope Jackson in relation to this case, the publicity, right, what she had, really, because of the body cams, because of her reaction to it. Listen, she may have got away with murder if she had even stabbed him 3 times and come out and said, I'm sorry, I just lost it. I've been in an abusive relationship for 20 years. He's done this, this and this, this. She didn't. She didn't. This man didn't do that at all. He never done any of that. Right from the first minute when the neighbours were told about this murder, he never ever said that he planned to do it. So the only way that you can get someone on a murder charge is to find out whether there was an intention there to kill. And in his case, there was not. So he got manslaughter, and that's why. But he got a very low sentence, the lowest you can get on manslaughter, really. I mean, God, I've known people, I can't believe it. But anyway, he got manslaughter, and as I said, manslaughter holds up a sentence up, depending on the gravity and the factors on that case, of up to 18 years in prison. That's what it can hold. So why they gave this man 5 years, I don't know. So I'd love to hear your opinions on that case. And has it changed your mind a little bit, this one, in relation to what was being said about Penny Jackson's case? These are contrasting cases. Same age, aren't they, really? They're in the older generation. You know, they've been with their partners a long time. One was outspoken about it, why she did it. The other one was quiet, remained calm. Or is it because he was a man? Is that it? Is that it? Because that's what a lot of people think. Is it because he was a man? Well, I'll have to wait and see all your responses on that. But thank you for joining me today. A strange little case, this one, but one that I wanted to bring you in. Now, the weekend's case is similar, but different. Different in a way. And we will go into a lot more about different things to do with the law and sentencing in that case. It's another one where did a man get away with murder. So, thank you for watching. You know what to do. You can subscribe. You can hit that like button. You can follow us on Instagram and on Facebook. And I haven't been on Instagram that much, but I must do it. There'll be clips of these sort of things on Facebook if you'd like to see before they come out. There's usually little clips I put on there once I've done the bit of editing and put it up. You can follow this case on Let's Have a Chat About Murder. I'd like to thank all my partners in crime and my members in my members lounge as well for supporting this channel. I really appreciate it, and I will see you again on Thursday mornings for Murder Mornings, and we will just be discussing this case and of course the last case that I put out, which was, you know, a viper's nest of paedophiles, and the response to that has been overwhelming, so thank you for that. And you know, we've had a lot of comments on that, so we'll be talking about them in Murder Mornings. So thank you very much for listening, and until the next time, bye bye.